One of the standout builds here at SEMA 2022 is Mike Burrows' Ferrari 244 GTK. This is a build that I've been following for a fair while since we interviewed Mike for our podcast, but it's finally debuted here at SEMA. We're here with Mike to find out a little bit more about the build. So Mike, for a start, congratulations on getting this thing finished. It is an absolute work of art. We never had any doubt. Let's go back though to the start. A Ferrari seems like an odd choice for a time attack race car. Why'd you go down that path?
I picked this car solely for looks. I think the 308 is like one of the best looking cars ever made, and I've been in love with it for a long time. I bought it irrespective of any performance capabilities or anything like that. I just said, hey, I want to build this car because I love the way that it looks. And that's not to place looks of it over importance on anything else, but if you're going to invest a ton of time and money into something, you better be happy with how it looks too. That's part of why we love cars, because they're visually interesting, just like they are fun to work on and fun to drive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the looks of it definitely, and you've improved it further. You mentioned irrespective of any performance capabilities of the car,
Sure.
And I'm interested to dive into that because I mean, it's a Ferrari. People view Ferraris, irrespective of the actual model, as a supercar. It was anything but, though, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's where they'd be wrong. This car is a complete turd underneath. This thing is trash. It's awful. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Bottom to top. Now, it might handle well from the factory. I'll give it that. But with respect to how it's built, it's just horrible. I mean, the metalwork under this car is some of the worst I've seen. And it's from the factory. I mean, this car was beautiful when I started. It was bone stock, borderline showroom condition. And then when it comes to the engine, that 3-liter V8 rated for 204 horsepower at the crank. So if you put a 20% drivetrain loss in, you're looking at 164 horsepower. At the wheels, we dynoed it 163, so perfect health. And we're talking about 163 wheel horsepower in a car that weighs 3,200 pounds. I don't know what that is in kilograms, but that's a heavy car and not much weight or not much power for it. So
suffice to say, it was never really going to cut the mustard out on the racetrack.
If I had spent the money on this car that I did and wanted it in stock form, if I was just into 308s or wanted that Ferrari experience, it would have been a massive disappointment. So thankfully, I bought this knowing it was never going to remain the same. And I was fine with that. That's part of the journey, was to get to take this car, rip it completely apart, throw everything away, and start from scratch with something that I think looks good, and then build something that performs just as good as it looks underneath.
All right, so let's move on to that power plant, because this is probably arguably one of the more controversial parts of the build, and there's going to be people who get it, there's going to be people who don't, and that's just fine. But what have you chosen there and why?
So under the hood, we've got a Honda K24, paired with a Quaife sequential gearbox, and then with a Garrett G42 1200 compact turbo, and it's cooled by CSF, which is, of course, why we're at their booth. I chose this engine because I truly believe that it is the most logical engine solution that could be put into this car for what I want to do with it, which is to go time attack racing. It was important for me to find something that was lightweight, something that was reliable, something that had a huge power ceiling, something that was affordable, and something that fit with a transverse engine layout, because this car had a transverse V8. I get a lot of people asking me, why wouldn't you pick something like an LS or a 2JZ or any of these other great engine platforms? But the problem is you'd have to cut this car and lengthen it in order to put one of those engines in it. There's not enough room behind the driver's seat to the rear axle. It's very short.
Let me just clear that up, because if people aren't picking that up there, the transverse that you mentioned there, which is quite unusual, particularly for a V8, it simply means that the engine was fitted east-west across, instead of what we'd see with a conventional mid-engine car, maybe a later model Huracan, for example, where the engine is northwest. So that's what you're saying. There's not a lot of length there in that engine bay to fit something that was mounted longitudinally.
Exactly. So when you think about a mid-engine supercar, almost all of them have a longitudinal platform. If you look at the 288 GTO, which was kind of the race version of a 308, if you will, not quite, but more or less, they lengthened that car's wheelbase so that they could run a longitudinal engine in it. And then the same with the F40. That's really not an option here unless you want to lengthen the car, and that's an obscene concept. Like, why would you do that? No.
Plus, we'll be waiting to SEMA next year to see the debut of it.
Exactly. That's not going to work. So I said I have to find something that's a transverse engine layout. There are a few transverse engine layouts for mid-engine rear-wheel drive cars. You could do something from an MR2 or something like that. But ultimately, when I said, hey, I want something with a lot of development behind it, part of that development isn't just aftermarket, but community driven. I said, if I think to cars that are raced around a circuit anywhere in the world on any given weekend, what are the most popular drive lines, right? And so you could use something like a Miata driveline, not transverse, but Miatas are tracked worldwide constantly. There's a lot of development behind them to have a reliable race car. You could use something like an LS, again, not going to work. The Honda K-Series platform is raced in so many Hondas and other applications. I said this has a community of racers behind it that have solved every issue I'm going to encounter, whether it's something like I'm struggling with oil starvation, or maybe I'm getting hot spots in the cylinder head trying to keep it cool, or what have you. Any problem that I can encounter when I'm trying to make this car truly function and truly work at 10/10ths has been figured out already. I'm going to have very few issues that are solely unique to my vehicle here. So I said, the K-Series just makes sense. Why would I not go with something that has all of that legwork already done for it?
Absolutely, and it arguably would be the best four-cylinder naturally aspirated engine out there, with the ability to put a 2.4 bottom end underneath the K-Series head. Makes it even better again because you've got more capacity. And as you say, people have already got the runs on the board. It's known, the formulas are known. You don't have to go and reinvent the wheel to make 500 or 1,000 horsepower. Sure. And in terms of that power target, you've sort of openly and publicly targeted 1,000 horsepower. Tell us a little bit about that, because you've got a couple of turbos for the car and it's not intended to always run at 1,000 horsepower, is it?
No, it's really not ever meant to make 1,000 horsepower more than one time. And a lot of people are going to hear that and say, well, then why would you do it? And part of it is to prove a point. I've had a lot of people question why you would put a Honda engine, especially a Honda four-cylinder, into a V8 Ferrari. And I want to showcase that it doesn't matter what parameters you throw at it. I can beat that Ferrari engine in any regard, including the most powerful F106 anybody's ever made. And I can do it easily. There's been tons of people that make 1,000 horsepower out of a K-Series. I'm not the first, not even close. But the point is that for a fraction of the cost you'd spend to get anywhere close to that with that Ferrari engine, I'm going to do it right here. I'm going to do it reliably, no problem. And then by having an engine that's built to make that power level reliably, because that's what I asked for Piston 4. I said, hey, I want to make 1,000 horsepower and I want it to be bulletproof. I never want to think about it. And they said, okay, here's the recipe for that. Knowing that it can do that, when I detune it and we put a smaller turbo on it and I make 400, 500, or 600 horsepower on the track, I'm never going to have a moment of pause. I can beat on it constantly and it's going to be bulletproof.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. Now, fabrication is really your sort of passion. That's what you're known for and what you demonstrate on your YouTube channel. In terms of the fabrication that's gone into this, obviously it's extensive and we can't do justice to every component that's gone into it. Literally everything within reason has been handmade. Now, I'm interested, did you ever sort of sit back and weigh up the sort of pros and cons of starting from scratch with a full tube chassis and using the Ferrari bodywork versus working with what you keep constantly coming up against, the poor workmanship of the Ferrari factory chassis?
So honestly, one of the worst hurdles for the whole build was when I started, I said this time around, I want to take on a project that is not a complete reconstruction of a car. I want to engine swap a car. So let me start with one that I know handles well, because the 308 is known for good handling characteristics. So I said if I can take a bunch of weight out of that car, I can put a reliable lightweight motor in, so on and so forth, this would be a good recipe. But it turns out that in order to make this engine work in this car, I had to start redesigning the suspension to go with it, in part because there is a fatal flaw with 308's rear suspension. The axle itself has a design flaw where it's got basically a sharp cut corner on it when it should be kind of a fillet. And even on a stock engine with big R-comps in the back of the car, you can split that, it will break the axle, and the wheel comes off the car.
That's not ideal.
I don't want that. I don't know anybody that does. So I said, I've got to solve this. I got to fix that. No one really makes aftermarket axles for that because there's not a lot of guys racing 308s these days. I'm sure that somebody out there has made replacements, but I couldn't find them. So in wanting to come up with a new axle solution and wanting a solution for something better than like the off-the-shelf brake options for a 308 and wanting to improve every other aspect of it, I said, well, while I'm at it, I'm going to redo the rear suspension. Well, if I'm going to redo it, maybe I can improve things while I'm at it. The wide body that I used for this car calls for a negative 81 offset, 10.5-inch wheel on the front.
It's aggressive.
That's very, very aggressive. And the problem with that is it doesn't do anything to address the scrub radius. And so I knew immediately by bolting wheels that would fill out these arches and make use of them, I'm not going to have characteristics for this car that handle well.
So I think that's just worth pausing on there, because this is something that the sort of stance movement, which you've been and is still a big part of,
Sure.
kind of it's that balance between looks and how well something works. And what you're saying there is that negative 81 offset wheel, you're bolted on, it'll fill out the guards, it looks like it's supposed to be there, it's going to let the car drive, but the downsides of the effect of the scrub radius actually is detrimental to the handling, which is the part that a lot of people, when they're bolting on these wheels, don't consider, correct?
Absolutely. I think most wide body cars, all but a very select few, don't take into consideration what changes when you start just bolting wheels on to fill the wheel wells. And to me, if I bolt these fenders onto this car and then just bolt wheels on to fill those wells, I haven't done anything to really improve the car in any way. I'm not going to get much net benefit other than maybe like improved grip from having wider rubber. But if I want a car that's really going to perform and something I can go take out on track and continue to improve, I said, I've got to go back to square one. I've got to truly build suspension that can utilize this. I should improve the track width of the car. I should fix the scrub radius. If I can get longer control arms on the car, I can probably have a better camber curve, so on and so forth. If I'm going to create everything, I can get the caster set right where I want it. So I said, all right, I got to learn all of this stuff. I got to do my research. And thankfully, I'd done a little bit of it before on the Model A that I had built. But I sat down, I started reading, and I said, all right, I think I'm equipped to tackle this. And so I took all the suspension off the car, I threw it all away, and started from square one, front and rear. So all 8 control arms on the car, the uprights, everything, it's all custom.
Okay, so when you're doing that, when you've got that flexibility, when you're going with custom components like that, obviously, essentially a blank sheet of paper approach, it would be very easy to get it just so far out of the ballpark that you can't see your way back. I'm interested, what was the design process? I mean, we know that you're very talented using Fusion 360. Was it modeled in Fusion 360? Did you do anything around sort of assessing the kinematics of the suspension as it went through its movement, sort of roll centers, etc., roll center heights, etc.? Camber gain curve, as you mentioned. How did you kind of come to the conclusion of what you wanted them to be before you started making parts?
So I designed the parts and faced the spatial constraints in Fusion 360, but I'll be honest, I'm not a CAD pro. I didn't really know how to use Fusion 360 to plot things like the dynamic changes as the suspension cycles. But there are a lot of calculators out there, and I found a calculator that approaches that from a much more simplified perspective. So you can really kind of plot out in 3D space or 2D space, depending on which one you're using, where your suspension pickup points are, both on the chassis side and then on the spindle side. You can set up where those are on a complete grid. And then you can also program in things like what the ride height of the car is, what the weight is, center of gravity, so on and so forth. And then that will plot out what the suspension is going to do when you load up the car. And you can tell it, I want to load it up, let's say 1G in a turn or what have you. And so I use that to kind of understand where all of my points need to be. I left the suspension pickup points on the chassis where they are with respect to geometry because, like I said, Ferrari probably got that right. And if it might not be the best, especially by current standards, suspension has evolved a lot, but I can probably count on them to have done a good job, and I'm not going to do better than they did, considering the car did handle well. But how can I take those points and then bring the suspension further out in the wheel wells and then also improve things using what exists? So with that, I plotted it all out, used the calculators, used Fusion 360, and landed somewhere where I said, I think what I have here is going to work. Now, I haven't gotten the car out on a track yet, but I have a little bit of a hint that I think I got it pretty good because one of the fears that I had was that with 275s on the front of this car and a manual steering rack, it's going to be really hard to turn when it's just sitting still because it came with 205s on it stock or something really small. But pulling it out of the trailer to come here and getting to drive it inside, without power steering at all, it turns perfectly. It's like it has power steering. A baby could turn the steering wheel on this thing, and I said, I got the scrub radius right. It was such a rewarding feeling, and I feel like if I got the scrub radius right, that means the rest of it is almost certainly right because the rest of it is a little bit easier for me to have plot in the software that I used. So
Ultimately, the proof's obviously going to be in the pudding when it heads out on the track for the first time. But I mean, that's going to be pretty rewarding as well to find out that it does work as you intended. Now, I'm interested because I've mentioned your use of Fusion 360. And it's actually really good that you pointed out you're not a CAD specialist or expert, as you've put it. But I think as time goes by, more of us in the enthusiast market are starting to see the benefits of getting at least some basic competency with the likes of Fusion 360. And I've really enjoyed watching your YouTube channel because you demonstrate how you're using that software and how you're applying it to real world problems on the car to design a bracket and then have the likes of Send Cut Send actually make that part, CNC bend it for you, and it's just good to go. You guarantee it is going to fit. You know, how much of a game changer have you found that technology, and how much more are you finding you're using it now as you go through your projects?
It's funny you ask. I actually had this complete conversation with Jim at Send Cut Send today, and I expressed to him that I genuinely think the use of CAD or Fusion 360 in my case is the most important tool in my toolbox. I think it has been pivotal in changing what my capabilities are as a builder, my ability to produce parts that are on par or just as good as like race shops. Like, I mean, I can look around and see things that I can say, I made that even if I didn't sit there and drill those holes myself. I built it in CAD, I developed it, I designed it, I engineered it, and then I can use someone else like Send Cut Send to produce that part for me, and it can arrive at my door, and I can put it on my car. I can weld it together, I can bend it up if I need to, or what have you. And here we are. I have this car because of software like Fusion 360 and the use of CAD, being able to design this suspension, being able to face every constraint that I have faced in building this car. Every part that I have need to build, I have used Fusion 360 to do it. Very little of it, even down to like the small brackets and stuff. I'm not gonna spend my time cutting out cardboard if I really don't have to. I can do that quicker and better and more effectively and prettier in CAD. Why wouldn't I use that?
And I think that's something that is so easy to overlook is just these small brackets. You know, if you're doing them by hand, they're so time consuming. And you know, if you're loading up a bunch of these brackets that you've designed and getting them all cut, the cost is just so small compared to what you put on your own time. And of course, the intricacies of being able to laser cut or water cut these shapes in a way that would be very difficult to do by hand. You're getting a more intricate product that just looks more professional. Now, I know that for those enthusiasts watching this who are maybe on the sort of edge of jumping into learning some CAD but are scared off because it looks daunting, is there any words of advice you'd give?
I think that in one long day, call it an 8-hour day, if you sit down at your computer, follow some tutorials, and just be willing to tinker with the software. Just play with it and try to understand how it works. I think in one long day, anyone can learn to do 95% of what they see me do on my channel, 95% of what it takes to build a car like this. It is such a powerful tool that on the surface probably appears to have a really steep learning curve, but in reality it doesn't. It's more just learn how to use the tools that it provides you with and learn how to think through the problem-solving process using those tools that are unfamiliar to you, and you're set. And I think one day is all it can take to build some really cool stuff.
I think the other thing I'll add in there is a lot of people will be following some of the really guru expert 3D modelers on Instagram. Maybe 3D Magic Mike is just one that jumps to mind. And looking at the work that he's doing, the level he's operating, and thinking, well, I can never get there, so I'm not even going to get started. And people need to understand that, you know, that's the upper 1% or 1/10% of what people are doing, and designing simple brackets, it's not that complex, correct?
Absolutely. I mean, it's important to remember that 3D Magic Mike O'Brien, is one of the best in the industry. I mean, he's the gold standards. He's who we all look up to. We all want to make parts like he does. And part of the journey is getting to that point. You need to embrace the failures you're going to make along the way, because that's where you learn. You're going to mess some stuff up, but that's part of the fun. You know, it's the failures are where you learn the most. And the upshot is it's just not hard to do. You can learn to do it making these little brackets, these little tabs, little things that suck to make in reality. It can take so much pressure off of your build, take so much time off of it. Anybody can do it. And I try to approach any aspect of car building that way. If somebody else can do it, that means I can learn to do it too. Doesn't mean I can do it as well as they can, but don't let an inability to do it keep you from trying.
Last thing I want to talk about here is just some of the fabrication equipment that you think is essential at the basics level. And we'll try and keep this reasonably short. I mean, obviously there's literally 1,000 million different tools that you could use. And I know that a lot of enthusiasts who want to get into fabrication and do some of their own work on their own cars, again, get a little bit sort of put off or daunted by the fact that they don't have all of these expensive tools. Could you name maybe a couple of your favorite entry-level tools that you just can't get away without, that maybe don't cost the earth?
I tell everybody that asks me the two most important tools for anybody wanting to do this is a grinder and a welder. I mean, you can build some incredible things with some just steel material, a grinder, and a welder. And I think most people would be really impressed how far you could get with those. That's all this stuff is at its core, is raw materials and the ability to form them and make something out of them. And the tools help make that stuff easier. The fancier tools you get, the more you're capable of doing, the more intricate you can get. But at its core, a grinder and a welder go a long way. And I think buying a good one and not being afraid to use either one, not being afraid to make some really ugly, really bad welds for a really long time before you get good at it is all there really is to it.
It's the old story that perfection in any industry requires 10,000 hours of practice. And unfortunately, while I wish it wasn't so, welding is no different. So if you want to be laying down those nice stacked dime welds, you're just going to have to spend time on the torch, correct?
100%. And on that note, when perfection takes 10,000 hours, on the other hand, never let perfection be the enemy of good enough, right? Don't be afraid to get close, but not all the way there. Because again, it's that delta in which you learn.
Yeah, that's really solid, and I think too many people probably don't want to try because they aren't perfect. But as you say, sometimes you've got to get good enough, and just that practice will continue to improve what you're producing. Look, Mike, we appreciate your time today. I know that you're probably lacking on sleep. It's been a long day at the show, so we'll leave it there. Thanks so much for your time chatting to us. And if people want a more thorough understanding of the car, because we've literally just scratched the surface, where are they best to find out more?
The StanceWorks YouTube channel. I've got probably 100 and some odd episodes documenting almost every single step of building this car. If you want to learn how to do what I do, I can't say that I teach every step of the way, but I try to show what goes into it, how I problem solve my way through it. And I think anybody can come away from watching everything that's gone into this car with a better understanding of what they can do to build something of their own, because anybody can do this.
What I also like about your YouTube channel is you don't sort of sugarcoat the hard parts or the problems or things that didn't go right. And I mean, this happens no matter how well you plan, things go wrong. So I think it's really good that you show both sides when things are going well and when they aren't. Look, again, thanks for your time, Mike, and really looking forward to seeing this car when it hits the track. Thanks.
Thank you guys so much. I'm stoked to be a part of this.
If you like that video, make sure you give it a thumbs up. And if you're not already a subscriber, make sure you're subscribed. We release a new video every week. And if you like free stuff, we've got a great deal for you. Click the link in the description to claim your free spot to our next live lesson.